First of all, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. From a young age, Josh was raised to appreciate antiques and collectibles, having tagged along with his parents to hundreds of auctions, antique shows, and co-ops. He became enamored with all the history they shared. Almost inherently learned the business, Josh was fascinated how items moved around the world and affected the lives of each unique owner. Later, with a background in accounting and business management, an auctioneer certification from the Pennsylvania State Program, and a passion for communications, Josh began his estate consultation and auction career in Quakertown, Pennsylvania, over 15 years ago. Josh has become a highly sought-after guest speaker, celebrity appraiser, and trusted estate consultant. These days, Josh continues to expand his knowledge, educate others, and seek out new opportunities. And we appreciate him so much taking the time from his busy schedule.
I'm excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
Okay, I'm going to bow out.
All right, thank you much. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Why Don't You Want My Stuff? The generational divide in collectibles. It's something that's always fascinated me, having been an appraiser, an auctioneer, and an estate consultant. There's a lot of things that come up and a lot of similarities between people in the generations. And I've written several things about this, and I decided to put it in a book. But what I want to do is I want to just give you a little introduction to myself quickly. How did I get myself into this? I ask myself that often. I was raised by, let's call them hoarders. That's what they were. And I might touch on hoarding a little later, but I was raised by hoarders. My parents had a boarding kennel, and my father was a professional handler and showed dogs all over the world. And dog shows are Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So all the other days he would go to auctions and estate sales and yard sales and antique co-ops. And that's when I would get to spend quality time with my family. So I would go along, and the last thing I ever wanted to see was an antique or collectible. And I found that they became more important to my parents. Everything was, do you know what this is worth? Do you know what this is worth? And if you would have told me I would have gotten this business, I would have told you were crazy. But I learned a lot through osmosis, but that's not really where most of my education came from, because I really wasn't interested. As a matter of fact, I fit one of the psychologies I'm going to talk about. I actually, didn't like these things. I actually resented them a little bit. But it's funny because I think that's why I got into the business I had gotten into, which was auctioning, because I wanted to help people with this illness as I saw it. But again, collectors are awesome, and you know, for the business I'm in, God bless them. But so what happened was, in high school, I started playing in a heavy metal band, and I went on to other bands, and I would tour up and down the East Coast, and I decided to open a music shop. That way I could get all my stuff wholesale. It makes sense. So I started buying and selling vintage musical instruments to make a little extra money, and this thing called eBay came along, and I'm talking the early stages of eBay. So eBay comes along, and I had to figure out a way to tap into this market, because I had a lot of used equipment, and I kept hearing, oh, you should put that on eBay. So, you know, as much as I fought it, I wanted people to come into my brick and mortar store. I decided, let's try this eBay thing out. Well, it took off like crazy. I was selling guitars to people in Japan and Germany, and it was the golden era of eBay, and it was fantastic. Well, my parents got wind of this, and they said, hey, we've been hearing about antique dealers selling there. Would you sell some stuff for us? And I said, sure. So, you know, I started putting things on eBay for them. Well, they told their friends. And it became, my music store kind of faded away. When I went and closed the music store and went out of business, I started an eBay shop. And this is before there were really like the eBay drop shops. This was the best education I would ever have in antiques and collectibles. This is where I really learned everything, because these antique dealers would bring me these things. If you hear any screaming at any point, that will be my 22-month-old daughter, Lila, and she might bust in here, which will be pretty funny. She's supposed to be napping right now. But anyway, so I got this education. These very astute antique collectors would bring me their collections and tell me all about the things. And, you know, once I sold something for a lot of money and made a commission on it, I never forgot it. And it was just one of those things. I started to learn about all of this stuff, and it was so educational. People often ask me, they're like, should I go to appraisal school and learn about antiques? I always believe, and there are some exceptions to the rule, but most appraiser schools will actually teach you report writing and how to write a report that will be accepted by an insurance company, et cetera, and, you know, but they don't have the time to teach you about antiques and collectibles. So what I tell people is follow the trends, follow what you see. If you're into something, follow the auction results. You know, use WorthPoint, go to live auctioneers, Invaluable, and Bid Spotter, and all of it, and just look at the realized prices. I find it's really where you get your education, and also what happens from year to year. We've all used price guides, and we all know you find a price guide from 1990 and look at what things are actually selling for today. It's completely different. So I'm plugging WorthPoint here, but it's really where you learn these things. So I decided this was my new business. I was going to buy and sell vintage antiques and then just consign on the side. Well, the consignment monster took over. I started consigning for people, and it was a regular thing. People would just bring me these things, and there's some great examples of crazy where a guy brought me a box of old firecrackers and said, put these on eBay. And I just looked at him and I thought he was nuts. Well, when I sold my first firecracker label for $5,000, and I'm not kidding, I started looking for firecrackers everywhere. That's how you learn these things that people would throw away. And it's really, that's where you get your education. Let me get my screen to work. So let me get right into what I need to talk about, because I'm really going to take you through the frustrations. The reason I got into this is every boomer I would be called to downsize all had the same frustration. And it would be their children didn't want their stuff. Now, you have to remember, these people would then tell me, hey, I have my grandmother's china. It's antique. You know how much this is worth, and my daughter doesn't want it. And then I became the messenger, and I had to be shot. And that was, I would tell them, this set's worth about $300. And they would say, oh, no, it's $20,000. I saw, you know, I heard that in 1980, so it must have gone up. And I said, the problem is simple economics. It's supply and demand. Your generation has this china set to sell, and the next generation doesn't want it. So there came the rub, and it was a problem. And I say China because the first article I wrote for the Arizona Republic was all about China, and I called it, Why Don't You Want My Stuff? Because they would be angry at their child for not wanting it. So let me go into, and I call that a price anchor. When someone is told, and there's a great psychology book written by Dan Ariely called Irrational Predictability, and it talks about price anchor. It talks about a million awesome facts about people's psychology, but it talks about a price anchor. And a price anchor is when your mother or a loved one, or you saw it once, or what you paid for it, puts a thought in your head of what it's worth. It's also a trick an auctioneer does. When an auctioneer chants down, when an auctioneer goes, hey, start me off at $1,000, how about $1,000, how about $500? The reason he said $1,000 is that's what he thinks it's worth, or wants you to believe what it's worth, to trigger that as a price anchor in your head. So when the bidding starts at $200, $300, and you get it for $400, you feel like you got a great deal. Well, grandma does that to you, and she says, don't ever let anyone give you less than $1,000 for this. Well, today in the market, that thing's worth $50, but you will go to your grave with this $1,000 in your head. So, and you're angry when it doesn't sell for $1,000, and it's just economics. So let me get into how this happened in the market. So you're the greatest generation. The greatest generation, the World War II people, that's, my father was actually in there. He had me late in life, kind of like what I did with my daughter. Funny how we repeat our parents in so many ways. Hence, I'm in the antiques and collectibles. Anyway, so you're the greatest generation who, again, I'll paint with broad brushes, and I don't know, not everybody's the same, but I think you'll relate. So the greatest generation, they lived through the Depression. So they had this, he who dies with the most stuff wins. So that philosophy was they weren't going to sell anything. It was all about having stuff. They saw the useful purpose in everything, including my father rusted out buckets and gas cans and broken. I remember finding 17 rotted circular saws. I mean, rotted like the cords were rotted. And I'd ask him what he was going to do with these, and he's like, oh, they're good. They just need a new cord. Well, you put a cord on there, all you were going to do is add electricity to a pile of rust. But he saw it as being useful. So that the greatest generation died, with all their stuff. So what happened? The baby boomers were saddled with this amazing pile of things they had to, and at a time in their life when their kids are going to college and, they don't have time to deal with this, and they remember it like it's challenging. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know any auctioneers. They didn't want to have a yard sale or a estate sale. They didn't know the values of things, and they remember making all sorts of mistakes. So what they said is, in their minds, this is now the boomers, I'm not going to do that to my millennial or Gen X child. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start downsizing now. And I probably pegged a lot of you with this one. I'm going to start downsizing now. Well, what happened is their millennial and Gen X kids don't want this stuff right now for a variety of reasons, which I'm going to give you. One, they're not at the time of their life where they're collecting. The boomers, the greatest generation got married and had kids maybe at 18, maybe 16, who knows. But 18 to 22, they got married, had kids. Their kids were grown, 18, 22, if they went to college. So like 44, they had this disposable income and became collectors. Maybe the wife had empty nest syndrome and decided to collect Hummels, and the husband now is like, he could buy all those, old toys he always wanted or cars, and he became a collector. Well, the same thing happens with the boomers. The boomers have disposable income now, but they're moving into another house or retiring, and they're downsizing, and they don't want this to happen to their children, so they're trying to give this to kids who their families aren't grown, they have their own things, they're not collecting yet. So it's this tidal wave of stuff that they don't want. So the market kind of got flooded at the wrong time. People were selling at the wrong time. In the last 10 years, I would say, the boomers were going, here's my stuff. Gen X wasn't collecting yet. Millennials didn't want it. And they tend to be minimalists in general right now, which is also just a cycle. You look at these cycles, like, it's not new. There's a lot of fatalists out there that'll say, no one's ever going to want antiques ever again. No one's ever going to do. It's not true. This happened in the 1920s. When Deco came out and Victorian was out of fashion. This happened in the 1960s with mid-mod and minimalist. We're in that same boat right now. We're in that minimalist thing, but guess what? Cycles repeat, and the smart people are going to be buying and collecting right now. If you could buy and hold for like 10 years right now, you'd be set. And that's what I'm trying to tell the Gen Xers and the millennials, because the antique dealers that made all the money in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s that is what you could be doing right now. So I want to get back to, so you have the millennials and boomers, and I'm sorry, the millennials and the Gen Xers, and I want to explain another reason why they don't want these things. And this one was new to me, and this came from interviewing employees of mine at the time. I had a woman that worked in my reception office, and a lady came in with China, and she was angry that it sold for like $300, which I had braced her for. I always try to manage people's expectations, and I would tell them, like, this is the market, and it's soft. Again, you can look these things up on WorthPoint and eBay and live auctioneers and tell them that, this set's going to bring on average $300. So when it actually happens, they still don't believe it because they still have that price anchor in their head. And I said, do you remember how your daughter didn't want it? I said, that's the problem. The proverbial daughters out there don't want it. So now it's just an antique collector or somebody that's going to sell to replacements.com. And that's what's happening. Well, the woman overheard this, my receptionist overheard this, and she goes, I can't believe it. She goes, I can't stand China. And I said, what do you mean you can't stand China? She goes, I hate it. I said, how do you hate? Would you not like dishes, or like, what is it that you don't like? And she goes, well, my mother had a set of china in a china cabinet in our living room. We weren't allowed to look at it, touch it, play with it, anything. All we were told is, do you know how valuable that is? That was your grandmother's. And when I was a child, we used to have tea parties with it and play with it. And she goes, my mother remembered the set fondly because she got to use it. She ate at her mother's house. She got to play with it as a child. Well, because it meant so much to her mother, she wanted to protect it and there be no damage or chips or anything. Well, her daughter, my receptionist, didn't get to play with it. So she had no bond to it. And in fact, she resented it because they weren't allowed to touch it or play with it. So when she grew up, instead of remembering it fondly, she remembered it negatively. And this might hit home for some of you. A lot of you did this. So it's like, and so it makes sense. The psychology makes sense. So another reason is people don't want to deal with these things now is because I always say people are lazy by nature. That's why they're looking for, apps to sell things. They like an antique dining room set. Think about, you have a dining room set that you got at IKEA, and you see a beautiful antique dining room set at a estate sale or an auction. Do you want to move it? Do you want to call your friends and say, that's another factor in the value? And plus we've ingrained in people Amazon, like I can have it overnight. Well, I can't have that dining room set installed in my house overnight. Well, you can if you know the right mover, but it's one of those things. So let me get into, and again, I'm sorry to be flying by, and I hope you guys are putting some great questions together. I want to also talk about, through all the economic turmoil we've had when the internet bubble burst, with the last recession and what's going on now, high-end stuff has seemed to be fairly impervious to this. The high-end art, all you're hearing is record prices, and it keeps going. The high-end stuff never seems to really get hurt because it is truly desired and truly rare. And it's one of those things that has maintained. The middle is what always gets hurt, just like the middle class. It's what always gets hurt, this center of the antiques and collectibles. So like the common, antiques and collectibles, and one of those things, and low end always seems to be okay, because when people don't have money, they'll buy the low end. So low end and high end is always fine. It's all of us stuck in the middle. And I want to talk about things that were made in the 90s to be collectible. That was, you were sold a bill of goods. If someone says, if the box says this is a collectible, it will never be a collectible because they made a ton of them. I mean, there's rare exceptions to that rule, but it's one of those things I always like to point out. And I also want to say, for all the things, antique furniture, china, porcelain, figurines, all of the things that are really soft, that the market has saw, again, there is still people out there that want them. Oh, let me touch on that. There's a really important lesson in that psychology I want to point out to maybe resellers. When you're working for a client or a consignor who has this personal attachment I'm talking about, sometimes it's not the money. And a lot of times deep down, it's not the money that it's worth or you're going to sell it for them for. It's they want to know you're going to find a good home for it. It's that someone's going to love that thing as much as they did. And sometimes that has been the greatest turn around for someone that was upset about something that someone sold. They'll see them picking it up at an estate sale, and their love of the antique and that thing will live on is more important than how much it sold for. So I just want to throw that out there. I've seen that turn very angry consignors around in 2 seconds. All right, so again, I want to tell you, I'm not all doom and gloom about it. I've already told you that I know what's going to come back. Everything always comes back. Bell bottoms, I just saw shoulder pads, it always comes back. But what's hot right now, I do a show, I don't know if any of you know this, but I do a show called Last Week at the Auction on YouTube. And it's where in 10 minutes, I go over all the auction results in the US and try to pick out 10 things I think that people will find shocking, the price, and also educational. And also, it's because I'm trying to follow the trends and see what's happening. So the one thing that is insane right now in the market is the Chinese antiques. When I say the Chinese antique, Chinese Asian antiques right now, you cannot predict them. There will not be a price guide coming out anytime soon that will make any sense, because the values have all been all over the place and on the good side. You know, you're hearing, and I'm sure you've heard on the news about, you know, someone finds a vase in a closet and it sells for $30 million. I'm not talking about those. That's winning the lottery, okay? That does happen. That's winning the lottery. What I'm talking about is that vase that's down the street that's $4,000, that's at a yard sale for $50, because they don't know. They just go, oh, my dad brought that back from Korea when he was there. Well, the Chinese, during the Cultural Revolution, unloaded all of their antiques. Mao did not want anyone to own anything that had ancestry tied to it. So basically, the Chinese government confiscated all this stuff, and they sold it through antique stores all over the world. Gumps in San Francisco is one of the biggest importers of this stuff, but it scattered all over the world. And in the 50s and 60s, people were buying these things for, you know, $10, $15, $20. And now this is one of the things that your boomers are trying to give you, and you're going, I don't want them. Well, guess what? Right now, if you're in an estate sale or yard sale or anything and you see Chinese, buy it. And I mean, I call it scratch off lottery tickets, but it's really been amazing to watch. I probably featured 50 pieces this last season that were just, you know, I as an appraiser would have said this bronze hand warmer is worth $200 on a good day, and it brings $6,000. And you can't find this information out unless you follow these trends. And it's one of those things, like I said, WorthPoint, prime example, you could put in a Cinnabar vase and you'll see, you know, 6,000 of them and not one like what you had. But I said, it's a lottery ticket. So Chinese is crazy. Coins right now and paper currency are smoking. Really, you know, gold and silver are really tracking up, but also knowing your rarities, your strange, you know, your errors and your mint marks and all that. But coin collecting and currency, paper currency, is really hot. One of the things I'm featuring here is this Hot Wheels. Another thing. Red line Hot Wheels right now. That little car right there with the chips and dings and no package brought $4,000 just 3 weeks ago, just to give you an example. And I want to talk about toys quickly because of the generational thing. Toys are the best way to track a generation and what they're buying and what they're collecting. And why I say that is, you want the toys that you either couldn't afford when you were a child or remembered fondly for nostalgic purposes. So that's what you're buying. So if your generation is buying, or you want to know what's going to be hot, look at what did you have as a kid? What did you remember fondly? What did your friends have? What did you covet? That is what's going to be hot when your generation has disposable income. So when I first started going to auctions, you know, when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, I would see these old men at auctions staying till the very end to buy Lionel trains from pre-war Lionel trains and paying $15,000, $20,000 for engines. And I'd be like, what are you going to do with that? And I just all trains must be worth a ton of money. So today, oh, those trains must be $30,000, $40,000. No, that train's now $500. And the reason is that collector has now sold his collection, and all the other collectors, they flooded the market, and you had a market that didn't remember trains. I didn't have a train set around my Christmas tree, but my cousins who were older than me, they had a train, so they remembered trains fondly, but they're not collecting trains. I remember these red line Hot Wheels. I wanted these Hot Wheels. So I get why they're hot. Star Wars figures, they're another one. You get it because it was important to your generation. It meant something to you. So those Disney collectibles, They're hot because you remember them as a child fondly and you want them. And that's why they've spanned several generations, because those shows and the cartoons and everything have spanned those generations. So they make sense. But it also makes sense why you're seeing the 1950s toys really get soft. That market is getting really soft. Records, that's another one that's really hot right now. And I have down here trash question mark. One of the most important things I can ever tell anyone who's ever having an estate sale or downsizing is get other opinions. You know, I'm a generalist, and you know, there's people that think I know everything about everything, and I don't. I learn something new every single week on my show when I'm researching for it. I learn about a new collectible, new antique, something new or something that's hot now that I didn't know. I can't tell you, I bet every single estate clean out I've ever been to, I've seen something in the trash can that I've taken out that was several $100s. People they don't know everything, and your relatives don't know everything. And having an expert come in and take a look, or just local antique dealer or somebody that has a clue what they're looking at, because I'll give you a couple of examples quickly. Pens, okay? I can't tell you how many Parker pens and Mont Blanc pens I have pulled out of trash cans for families and gone, here, you just threw away $3,000 in 6 pens. And they didn't realize, they're worried about their dining room set that they think's worth $1,000 that's $50. I mean, these are the things that you don't realize. Hunting licenses. I don't think they are what they were 10 years ago on eBay, but there was a time where people were collecting these hunting licenses. And I went to look at a coin collection, and while I was sitting there as they were bringing me their Morgan silver dollars, I glanced down. They were cleaning their uncle's house out, and in their little trash can were all these hunting licenses. I said, may I go through your trash? And they looked at me like I was crazy. I pulled out the hunting licenses, and I said, oh, I'll put these online for you. I think they're really good. I just thought they were good. Well, after I got them $6,000 for this stack of hunting licenses, they were pretty excited. And from there on, all my friends who were also selling online from my site learned to look for those at estate sales and yard sales and all this. So it can be quite the education, and there's so many things out there that you don't know. Christmas, vintage Halloween. People clean out houses and they see grandma's Christmas stuff and they go, ugh, who wants these old little German lights and bulbs and stuff? And they're throwing away hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. It's one of those. It's really one of those things that I find really fascinating. I'm really trying to watch my time, and again, I apologize for being all over the map with ADD here, but I just there's a lot of things I'm excited to tell you about. You can always buy my book if you want. Why don't you want my stuff? It has all this. But anyway, I want to talk about art quick too. Probably the most common thing I'm called as an appraiser about is art. Everyone has a painting that they think is worth a fortune, or that they don't know about or can't make out the signature. And I call art scratch lottery tickets, because a painting you paid $5,000 for in 1980 might be worth $100 or $20,000. More likely, sadly, the lesser. When you purchase at a gallery, galleries are all about the art of the sale. When you buy a painting at an art gallery, you are buying, you're paying for the rent, you're paying for the commission of the salesperson. Most of them just work on commission, and you're paying for the experience. So the second you walk out the door with that painting, it's probably worth a third, if not less. And it's not telling you something you probably don't know. You like it, so that's all that matters. And you enjoy it, you hang it on your wall, and you're supporting art, which I'm all about, supporting artists. So I get it, but it doesn't mean it's gone up. It's the most common thing. I paid X, it must have appreciated. It's not a stock or a bond. And hey, some of those don't appreciate, obviously. If you ever want a company to go out of business, have me buy a share of their stock. So, but with art, once you get into the big money art, you think your grandmother has a Picasso or a Jackson Pollock or something, you enter a whole new world where provenance and science must match, or you have nothing. What I'm telling you about that is forgeries and fakes, and even politics can ruin a painting. And I should do a whole series on that, but I'm going to skip over that. But art is one of those things that it's its own animal. You really have to find an expert that knows, and beware, there's a lot of things out there. I'm talking about provenance here, and everyone out there is an expert. There's there's all sorts of experts online that say they can authenticate a painting, and when you get into the six-figure art world, beware. Ask lots of questions. Get several opinions before you submit anything, because I'll be writing a novel about this one. So that's a true story right there, those ladies. Authentication. I want to get into just basic authentication with and how it affects value. PSA DNA does baseball cards, sports cards, action figures, that kind of thing. And it can really influence value, because in today's world, people don't accept your opinion of it's in excellent condition, or it's perfect, or it's mint. People are willing to pay for an expert. It's like a Carfax. They're willing to pay more because you have that authenticity. I probably should really watch my time, and I hope I touched on some things that you guys are interested in. So feel free to jump in, Dana, and save me at any time, because
no,
like I said,
please carry on. This is great information. If anybody needs to leave, feel free to bow out, because you will get a copy of the recording. We can go as long as you need. Please go for it.
All right. So
thanks, Josh.
Sure. So I was talking about authentication, so PSA DNA, SGC and NGC in coins, again, same thing. And knowing when to use these authentication process, these companies is process onto itself. And I try to explain to people, and I've done it for several people for free. They'll send me a picture of something and they say, is this worth me sending in, paying money to have it authenticate, not just authenticated, but graded by one of these companies? And I say, well, if it's going to double the value of the item, yes, definitely. So I like to look at these things and really know it's going to make a difference. Just sending out for the sake of getting graded and it's scratched and nicked, it's not worth it. So ask an appraiser. Most will give you their opinion for, I don't want to speak for all of them, but most of them will give your opinion whether it's not for nothing, or or Facebook groups today are amazing. Put on a Facebook group and say, should I have this graded? The things you're starting to see that the grading is mattering is in action figures right now. If you have something that's carded, I couldn't believe, I remember a friend of mine wanted to start an action figure carding, the carded figure where it's still in the package. He wanted to start a company grading packages, and I thought he was nuts. Well, now it's a huge business. So see, I should have, if I would have invested, it wouldn't exist. Anyway, let me talk about the fair market quickly too. You'll hear this is worth this, and I even have an insurance rider from 1980 that says it's worth $30,000. So therefore it's true. And then I say, well, that's an insurance appraisal. This is always true in jewelry, but also in art, furniture. If you had the appraisal done in the 90s, and you had a dining room set and it says it's $5,000, what does the fair market say? So you have two things. You have the insurance replacement value, which means if I had to replace it today, heaven forbid, there's a fire, it's gone, and I need to buy it today, what is it worth? Why is that figure always higher? Well, because I'd have to go buy it retail, buy it online today, and I have to pay whatever they're asking. There's no bartering. There's no waiting for a good deal. That's what it is. That's insurance replacement value. And again, I'm dumbing these down for myself because there are other anomalies, but I truly believe what I'm saying, so I'm going to tell you anyway. So the fair market. The fair market, I used to always say, is whatever it would auction for. Well, in today's world, with a good advertised online international auction like they all are on, Live Auctioneers and Valuable, Bid Spotter, Art High Bid, all of these, when they're online like this, and the whole world had an opportunity to bid on, let's say, this Beatles lunchbox, and it sells for $800, that was the fair market value of that thing. And if you see, and I always relate this to baseball because I love baseball, if you see 10 of these selling on eBay, and then WorthPoint says, here's 6 of them, and they sold for $800, your fair market value is $800. Now, if you go into 3 antique store co-ops and they're asking $1,500, you know, that's probably your insurance replaced value, and obviously not the fair market, because if you were buying it, which one would you buy? Would you wait for it at the auction, or just, I want it now? Now, that's an interesting thing, buy it now, want it now, and insurance, because people are, you know, because of the, I don't want to blame Amazon, you know, I'm an Amazon affiliate. So, but Amazon literally had made this where I want it now, self-gratification immediately. So that has influenced fair market value a little bit. And that's an interesting thing I saw in a seminar. So live and online, there's still some pockets where regional factors matter. And where I see that mostly is in local artists and furniture. Like in the South, you might get more for primitive, you know, American furniture than you would in San Francisco at an auction, because an online internationally advertised sale is great. But if you're looking for a mid-Atlantic pine cupboard, you're not going to click your mouse and go, yes, I'll buy that, because your mind's automatically going to say the shipping is going to be $2,000. So there are still pockets of regional factors that will beat the internet still. So, and you'll see that, like I said, you'll see that in large items, and you'll see that in regional factors where like an artist is really well known in an area still. There's probably some other factors there, but that's really the one. And I say, God, I mentioned furniture. One of the trends I've seen recently, and I'm pleased to say, is I'm starting to see antique furniture on the whole creep up. And again, I follow this every single week when I'm getting ready for my show, and I'm seeing American antique furniture, European, I'm seeing even Depression era furniture start to rise. Mid-century's been hot for about 10 years now, mid-century modern. But I was seeing colonial, like true American furniture that I used to sell Boston Highboy for $10,000 in the early 2000s, and you'd be lucky to get $800 for it like 3 years ago. Now I'm starting to see $4,000 and $5,000 again. I think people are starting to appreciate it, number one, and I also think there's a whole bunch, I mean, green and recycling, but you're seeing people appreciate the antiques. The shows on TV with history really matter, and this is one of the things I always love to talk about. The celebrities who on social media and the influencers are starting to talk about antiques because they're getting older and they're getting nostalgic and they're starting to collect, and that will influence the market. I used to make a joke, it was about 10 years ago, that you know, Martha Stewart would tell you to buy Fire King mixing bowls, and like sheep, people went out, and all of a sudden I was selling Fire King mixing bowl sets for $600 on eBay that were $30 at yard sales, because Martha Stewart was saying, I love my Fire King 1950s. Well, then all of a sudden, you know, Kmart or Macy's came out with great reproductions and they killed it, and people went, why do I want these gross old ones when I can have brand new ones that look like that? But people are starting to appreciate the antiques and the original because of the shows like Pickers and Pawn Stars, and the influencers are telling people to like this, that they like this stuff, and people want to be like them, which, you know, for as all the things that people say negatively towards that, for the business, it's going to be fantastic because they're all getting older. Just wait. And I used to make a joke. And if you're listening to me, Justin Bieber or one of the Kardashians, I want you to do something for me. I want you to take a Hummel figurine, and instead of Elf on the Shelf this year, take a Hummel figurine and put it whenever you're shooting a video, a YouTube video, and say, I love Hummels, and just watch what would happen to the market. And it really matters. So the next generation needs the market. It's going to be Justin Bieber. It's going to be, but the next generation's Martha Stewart, whatever they like, is going to influence the market. But I think you're going to see a ton of it because this socially conscious, all these YouTube influencers and Instagram, you're going to see them get older and get nostalgic and they're going to tell their fans what to buy. That's what you want to be collecting now. That's going to be a really, really cool thing. So I'm here at the end, and I did breeze over a ton of stuff. So I'd love to answer some questions. I'm really curious to see what some of them are. So, and if anybody wants to know, that's a Charles Laloma bracelet right there that sold for, I think, somewhere around $100,000. I just always love pieces like that because I'm now in the desert Southwest, and when you look for things like that, it's that's the lottery tickets we're looking for at estate sales out here. So what you got for me?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I just love the statement about the Hummels.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
That's such a good idea. We need to like get the hashtag and get the people moving on that.
You know what's funny? The next auction I see around here where they have lots, because they sell them now, you know, like 30 in a lot. I'll buy them in all my videos. Maybe I'll make like some like YouTube war video with them and like try to give them get a hashtag going.
It's just so true. When I go treasure hunting with Point, and it breaks my heart to see the older generation, I'm talking like in their 90s, sitting in their booth with the walls and walls of Hummels, and they're trying to sell them.
Well, it's another thing. The internet, you know, a lot of the dealers really, you know, remember when eBay first came out and they were really negative. Like, I remember I would go to an auction and someone would call me an eBayer, and it was like a dirty word. Yeah. Like, how dare he comes here? He's an eBayer. Like, oh, you're a boother. You know, it's like you sell in a booth. I mean, it was funny to me. And you know what's funny? I would always end up selling for them in the long run because I'm like,
oh, funny.
In Sheps Grove in the middle of nowhere, you're not going to get what I'm going to get for you on eBay from a Chinese buyer, you know. So it is a funny thing, but I really, when you see those Hummels, what the internet did to Hummels was show you how many they made. So when one used to be rare, when it would come up at an auction, like I was in the Allentown and Philadelphia area. And when you would see one come up for an auction that the collectors of Hummels at the time didn't have in their collection, they'd fight over it because it was rare. Now they can just go on eBay and there's 20 to bid on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's crazy. I've seen people actually use them for target practice, and it's sad but true.
You know what's funny? Whenever I see that, it used to really upset me, and now I go, it's making my, you know, not mine, I don't have any Hummels, but it's making them more rare. So you're making somebody else's worth more. So I try to look at it from that perspective. As that especially was true when all the sterling in the last time sterling spiked, not now, but the last time sterling spiked, that got up to around 30, 35 bucks about 4 or 5 years ago, and all the Victorian sets that were getting melted down, I was like, you know what? It's making the other stuff more rare, and it'll drive the price up.
Great point. Great point. Now, we did have Elizabeth, when you were talking about, when you mentioned the PSA. Now, I'm not up on things, so I don't know about this, but she said, hi, Josh, how about the recent PSA faking scandal?
You know, I just heard something about that, but I can't weigh in on it because I don't know, but I'll research that now. Maybe I'll write about it, because let me tell you, I would not be surprised, because I had an issue with them where a client had a large transformer collection, and he had a couple of graded transformers that were graded by PSA, and we had sold them, and this guy said, hey, this one's fake. And I'm like, what do you mean it's fake? It's a transformer in the box. He goes, yeah, it's it's a knockoff. And I'm like, this is graded by PSA. He goes, yeah, they were fooled. So I contacted them, and they said, yeah, there were these fakes that fooled us. And I'm like, okay, what are you doing about it? Ooh. And they're like, because you graded this and put a rating on it, and I sold it because of that. And they're like, well, we didn't do it for you. You know, so it's an interesting thing. I think you know, and I'll tell you, in coins, a really interesting one with NGC, which is, they're the same, it's the same factor. I got one of the holy grails of pennies brought to me. It's the VDB 1909. No, it's the 1943. It's the war year that was made in bronze, but it wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed to be a steel penny. And someone brought one in, and I went to every website that showed you how to look for a forgery, and I was positive this one was real. So I sent it in for grading because it was a very expensive grading process. And that's another thing, the more expensive something, the more valuable something's going to be, the more the grading cost, which I've always found was odd because you're doing the same process. You know, why is it $30 to grade this, but $600 to grade this, and the same person's grading it and doing the same process? Well, it was explained to me because of their, like, an insurance liability. You know, it's going to cost them more if they're wrong. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So this penny I sent in, and they sent it back slabbed in a case, and it said forgery. And I said, you know, I'm an appraiser. I'm very interested. What was the tell? Because I read about how the weight wouldn't be right. The weight was right. I read about how the number would be, but this was right. They said, we can't tell you because if we do, if they know we're on to this, they'll fix it. So I think they're just as susceptible to forgery and fraud as we are.
Wow, they'll have to kill you.
Exactly. Yeah, and I understand that because think about it. This is a $2 million penny if it's real. So if they can make them, you know, it's
that's really interesting, and it's nice that they shared that with you because I've not heard that before.
Yeah, I'm really curious I wonder if it's about that. I mean, hopefully they weren't, you know, I've always wondered if they would ever be susceptible, like a person that works there being susceptible to some kind of bribe. Because think about it, there's been, again, I'm not saying that, but I know. I've always thought, like, you know, because I had a $20 gold piece we sent in that if it would have came back with a grade of AU 53, it would have been worth $250,000. Instead, it came back AU 50, which is the most minute detail. It was worth 25 grand. So it was 10 times more for that one little extra grade, and it's subjective. And it was like, man, if I could give somebody $50 to give me that extra number, you know. So I wonder if they've ever been susceptible. Obviously, they would keep that a secret, I'm sure. It wouldn't be good for business.
Sure. Yeah, interesting. Linda was asking about old costume jewelry.
Oh, I love costume jewelry. That is another one that people throw away or give away at yard sales for nothing. They'll literally put grandma's chest out and they'll say $30 for all this stuff. And it's because they usually, and even this is the part that makes me crazy, they'll take it to a jeweler, a known jeweler, who they'll give it to them. They'll pull out all the gold pieces for them and say, this is these, and I'll buy these. And they'll give them back the costume jewelry. And there's so much money in there, but even the jewelers don't know. They don't want to mess with it. What you're looking for in the costume jewelry is the names. It's Weiss, Eisenberg, Lisner, Miriam Haskell. God, there's so many. Trifari. There's so many, and again, I call them scratch-off lottery tickets. But these brooches, you know, even a basic Trifari brooch is $35, $40. And when you're, you know, people think they're not worth anything. But if you went to your grandfather's house and he had a jar full of change, and you knew at Coinstar there was $300 in there, you'd go change it out. In these jewelry boxes, there's probably $1,000, and people look at it like it's $20, $30 because they don't like it. Or they just don't think. There is a huge market for costume jewelry. I love costume jewelry. I've found, you know, in Miriam Haskell alone, we did a sale in Tempe, and in Miriam Haskell alone, she had about $6,000 just in brooches.
Is that right?
Yeah, there's some really great books. I know I have a couple on my site. I think Warman's prints it. It has a recent printing. that has all the key names you're looking for. I mean, of course, online there's a bunch of vintage costume jewelry websites for identification, but that's where I think you can't beat a book, because you literally have the book. I think WorthPoint even has the one I'm talking about available in a PDF, but I still think you can't beat a book to flip through it and go, oh, I saw that brooch at the co-op. Oh, I saw that brooch. Yeah, I love costume jewelry, and again, it's so trendy. It's actually in again, and it comes like Bakelite was hot like 10 years ago, and then it just kind of got soft. Well, now it's coming back again.
Is it?
Yeah, cycles are, cycles used to be, I remember my mom, when I was a kid, there would be cycles are every 30 to 40 years. It was a generational cycle. And now it's like every 10. In fashion, it's like every 7. And it's because everything's faster. Our computers are faster, our life's faster. But people get sick of a thing, quickly, and then it's the new thing. I still can't believe shoulder pads came back, but it's like bell bottoms. I never thought bell bottoms would either. So.
Well, we have a good one here from Kelly. She said, this was so enjoyable. We have a consignment business in Chicago, and I've got whiplash from nodding yes to everything you've said.
Oh, yeah. I thought she was going to say, this man has ADD and really needs to be on some kind of medication.
I think that's a good one.
I literally pant. My wife goes, oh, yeah, no, never.
She said, I wanted to mention the benefit we've had from trends in TV shows. We sold a 400 plus piece collection of MCM barware during the height of Mad Men, and the timing was just perfect. We were able to really capitalize on the moment. Don't just use Mad Men in your eBay description. Yikes. Thanks again. This was great.
That's awesome. Barware is hot. It's funny. I'm glad you brought that up. One, I love Mad Men. I thought that was a great show. It's so funny. It's so hard to like John Hamm in it, but you like him. It's like one of those characters. You're like, why do I like this guy? But it's such that really, the mid-mod. I mean, I know people that drool over his living room in that show because of they were really on point with that stuff. But barware, especially with the pandemic, has gone crazy because people are you're not going to the bar is at your house. Right. So people are literally dressing up and having Zoom cocktail parties, and they're trying to out barware each other. I saw a whole movie.
Wow.
So a local auction house here in Glendale, R&R just had a barware set of NASA glasses from the 60s. They were like 60s, or I think it was the end of the 60s, early 70s, because they were Apollo, and I couldn't tell if it was earlier missions. But I had never seen them before. But just a set of 6, with the decanter, it was $400. And I mean, literally, they almost just put them in a box lot. They didn't look, I would have put them in.
Sure.
That's the thing you have to remember. Like, I'm just as guilty of it. It's funny. I remember when I would go to auctions as a kid, I couldn't stand the auctioneers that would cry about, like, oh my God, do you know what this used to be worth? Now I'm that guy. I'm that same guy. Because now it's like I'll have a Roseville wall pocket and go like, I used to get $600 for this. Now they're $35. And I'm that angry. But just like that, I also, old dog, new tricks. I've learned that stuff. It's like, don't forget it. When you see that trend, that barware, and you can't make mistakes on it when you're buying it at yard sales. You just can't, and it's not worth anything. And you paid $3 for it, get rid of it. But that barware, cocktail shakers. Oh my gosh, chrome cocktail shakers.
They've all come back for sure. That's interesting. Yep. I didn't know that about the Zoom parties, though. That's so awesome.
I just saw somebody have because I thought it was funny because it's about as personal as you're all sitting there drinking and like this, sitting there and having cocktails and watching other people drink, and it just, I think for me that would last about a half an hour till okay, I gotta go watch something,
Yeah. But oh my goodness. Well, that's if anybody else has any questions, you can drop them in the question box. Otherwise, this was really good stuff, Josh. I'd love to have you back, and and focus on maybe some areas that we could zoom in on.
Oh yeah. Yeah, if you go to my blog, you'll see,
Yes.
I try to segment it in the sections.
Okay.
So you'll see like subjects that I've written about, and maybe
Yep.
that would be perfect.
Okay, I'm so glad I found you. I actually let everybody know I found Josh on YouTube, and I started stalking him, and I was so impressed, and I thought, oh, we got to get this guy on to do a webinar for WorthPoint. So, yes, so Linda said, yes, please have him back. He's so very interesting.
Thank you. I love. Hey, anytime I can talk about this stuff is awesome.
I know, right?
It's funny. This one guy goes, "You're so passionate about it," and I'm like, because my why I did this is I hated to ever see somebody. I feel guilty going to a yard sale and buying something for $5 that I knew was 500. So it's like, if I can educate people. Now the dealers all went, "I hate this guy," but no. The whole point was I wanted them to know. And again, I don't begrudge anybody doubling their money, tripling their money buying something, but I just want people to know, and I don't want the good stuff thrown away either. So
yes, I know it. I've actually done that myself, where I would advise them and say, hey, I don't really need this, but I'm telling you, you should put that, change the price, or you might want to hold on to it. So I have done that as well. You feel guilty if. The
last time I did that, I love that. I've had people get mad at me when I've done it. And the last one, I was in Glendale. I was in Glendale, and there was a toy train set in the box from the 30s. Wow. And they had $10 on it. And I said, this set's worth about $500. And she said, well, you're not even going to give me $10. I said, I don't want you to sell it. I said, here's 3 auction houses you could have sell this. I feel guilty buying this from you. She just grabbed it, took it inside, and was like mad at me.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes you can't win. You gotta have to.
Just a weird reaction. Yeah. That used to happen to me in Pennsylvania. I used to go when I would say, hey, let me consign that with me. Let me sell it for you. Because it was great advertising for me, because when they would let me and I would sell it, they would tell all their neighbors and friends. Right. And then I'd get more jobs out of it. So you don't know. You can't know everything.
No. And sometimes it's more about, I used to say before I started eBay, when I was doing flea markets, and I'd say, sell a heap, sell it cheap, move it in, move it out, just so you could always make money on something else.
Oh, exactly.
Right.
I used to have a rule when I would buy box lots at auctions. It was like $35 was the max I was ever going to spend. Yeah. And if anybody knew me, they knew if they wanted it, it was $40. It was like, if I was bidding on it, I'd go to 3. And those were my gambles, And I would remember the thing I bought the box for was never the thing that was worth the money. It would always be some oddball, but it was, I said that was a college class. You were taking a course.
Exactly. It's cheap
education.
That's it. That's what it's all about. And I don't know everything either. And it's nice how, as a community, like I know in the WorthPoint community, we learn from each other. And I just value that opportunity. So thank you again, Josh.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right. So we'll do it again soon. So meanwhile, happy hunting and selling and sorting through that stuff. And congratulations on your baby.
Oh, thank you so much. She's awesome. I can't believe she must have went down for her nap. I was sure we were going to have a visit.
Oh, I was hoping. Maybe
that
next time.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, guys.